It's a whole lot of us, that's my family. Wanna go higher, turn up the tempo, increase the BPM, okay. Increase the BPM. Increase the BPM. Increase the BPM. Increase the BPM.
What's up, guys? This is Chris Morgan with FCA here at the University of Louisville. Welcome to our weekly podcast, In the Huddle, where we ask current or former athletes and coaches into this huddle, into this space, to talk about what God has done, what he's doing, and what he will always be faithful to do. I'm really excited about today. Got one of my teammates, my co-laborers in the faith, dear friend, Aaron Nance. Aaron, welcome to our podcast, man.
Yeah, appreciate y'all having me.
When I say ours, it's ours, man.
Yeah.
Welcome to our podcast.
I mean, this is pretty cool. This is the first time in here, so it's like, I've seen it on TV or on YouTube, but being on this side of it this is pretty cool. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I know a ton about you, but a lot of people that are watching this may not know much about you. Tell them, from Louisville.
Yep.
Okay, so tell them a little bit about what was it growing up like in the Nance house?
Yeah, so from the city of Louisville, my mom, we grew up in Newburgh. With my dad's side, he was a lot all over the place in the South End, a couple different spots. We ended up moving to Shively and then to Valley Station when I was in middle school. So majority of my childhood was split between, my mom's and my dad's. With my mom, we lived with my grandmother. So it was me, her, my older brother, Charles, and then, of course, my mother, all in the house together. And it was cool. It was very interesting, just trying to sort through the dynamic of having a split household, because at the time you don't really understand kind of what's going on. You just go with the flow. But then as you get older, you realize, the importance of having just two parents in the same household. And
talk a little bit about that, because for so long, even being believers, that's something that the believer kind of hung their hat on, to just stay married. But even in the church, even 50% of marriages now, even the believe in Christ, end in divorce. And so being a product of that, what was that like growing up? I mean, you said you didn't think about it when you were younger, but growing older, what kind of effect or did that have on you think?
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, as you get older, you realize that, okay, something ain't right here, and it really comes from like seeing other people's experiences. So a lot of the people that I grew up with were kind of in the same scenario, one parent household, single parent household, or they're living with their grandmothers. So it was just like normal, because, you see the people up the street and their grandparents, they know your grandparents, and it's just something that was normal in our area. But then when you start to, get older and you see, people being dropped off at school by mom and dad, or you see people on your AAU teams who are experiencing that from a two-parent household, or you go to somebody else's house and you see mom and dad in the same house and they're welcoming you in, it's like, hold on. Okay, something, the math ain't math in here. Like, there's a dynamic that, that is missing. And then for me, it just created in me just a heart to say, for my family, I didn't want to have, the same result of what I experienced for my children. So that kind of moved something in me. Ironically, I just was looking in Deuteronomy. I want to say it's chapter 30, verse 15, where it talks about just generational curses and generational blessings. And God is talking about establishing the generations, but that only happens once you make a decision to come to God on his terms. It only happens once you make a decision to show up and do things the way that God has called you to do them. But he also talks about confessing the iniquities of the fathers, but then also your own iniquities as well. So then, you have to say, like, okay, yeah, like the reason why this is happening is because of sin. And, the reason why, I am prone to go that way is because of my own sin. So now I have to make a decision to say, okay, do I want to continue in the sin that I've seen and that I've witnessed and that I've experienced, or do I want to be different? Not saying I'm not a sinner. I'm still a sinner, obviously. I won't say obviously, but I'm still a sinner. But it's making a choice and a decision to not continue in some of the same patterns that you see before you.
Yeah, I've always said that you got to be one of the most selfless people in the world to get married, and you got to be even more selfless to have children. And when you saying, I grew up in a divorce home. Both parents loved you, and cared for you, but you made a decision like, hey, this is not gonna happen in my house. And so you have to go into it being selfless. So, obviously you went to Seneca High School. You was an athlete there. Tell us a little bit about Seneca High School and playing sports there at Seneca.
Yeah, it didn't start off the greatest. Some people know, some people don't. But when I was in middle school, I was actually bullied a lot. So when I got to high school, it created this sense of being a pleaser to people. So I started to try to identify with the groups that were making fun of me. And my freshman year was really, really bad. Being a class clown, joking around. And I actually should have flunked out of Seneca my freshman year of high school because I was too busy worried about gaining the approval of my peers so I wouldn't be made fun of versus focusing on the things that I should have been focusing on. So my freshman year was very, very rough. I had to go to summer school, had to, take a couple classes just so I can be on grade level for my 10th grade year. And then my dad told me I couldn't play football until my first report card. Because prior to that, I was a straight A student. All my grades were straight A's. And then I get to Seneca and I'm, D's and U's and, that. And my dad said, well, going into your sophomore year, if you want to play football, then I have to see a report card. And I was trying to show him progress reports, and he was like, no, I don't want a progress report. I want a report card. After that, locked in and didn't play football my sophomore year because the report card didn't come out until 12 weeks into the school year, and football season was over by then. So it was basketball. And then I actually made the decision to not play football anymore after that. I was going to just play basketball and go into the wind. And then we had a really good quarterback when I was at Seneca by the name of DeMarcus Smith. He was a Elite 11 guy, strong arm, solid quarterback. And he came to me in between sophomore and junior year and was like, man, I know you said you was done playing football, but I really need some receivers. And all you got to do is just go rebound it like you do in basketball. I'm just going to throw it up. And you just go get it. So I was like, all right, let's do it.
And he's a great athlete. I remember he went to Western, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he went to Western. Yeah. You mentioned, and I want to get to more of your sports, but you mentioned about bullying. There's all shapes and forms and facets of bullying, hazing, whatever you want to call it nowadays. There may be people that are listening, that they try to gain the approval of people and allow that stuff to happen. Your story even goes a little bit more deeper, man. Share a little bit about that. Like, how did that? And obviously, you don't have to mention any names or anything, but just how did that bullying come into your world?
Yeah,
how'd you deal with it?
Yeah, so I can laugh about it now. It's kind of funny. It wasn't funny at the time. So when I was in the 6th grade, I tried out for a basketball team at TJ Middle School. And when I tried out for the basketball team, I was terrible at basketball. It was really bad. And I ended up messing up a couple drills. And our basketball coach, he came to me and said, hey, I think it's best if you just have a seat. So I got kicked out of the tryout. Like, you got to be bad to get kicked out of a tryout. So got kicked out of the tryout, but something in me just wanted to be a part of the team. So I go to Coach Owens the following week, and I'm like, hey, Coach, like, can I be the manager on the basketball team? And he was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, you can be the manager. So at the time, the movie Radio came out, and radio is about a special needs kid in South Carolina who was a manager of a basketball team and football team, and Cuba Gooding Jr. was the star of that movie. And the sad part about my situation was I looked just like him in the movie, so it was bad.
But as funny as that is, you still had to deal with a lot of stuff
yeah,
that was similar in the movie.
yeah. So I'm trying to just serve the basketball team, trying to get them water, get jerseys together, all these different things. And at first it was a joke. At first it was you laugh it off, but after about 4 or 5 months of the same thing, it's not a joke anymore. I can laugh about it now, but at the time, I'm in the 6th grade. I'm trying to figure out who I am. It's always that awkward stage when you go from elementary to middle school, and people that I thought were friends of mine were the ones making fun of me. So I wanted it to stop, and it didn't. And it was very, very discouraging. And I found myself becoming just an angry kid, angry at my mom, angry at my dad, angry at my siblings. Just a lot of anger in the midst of all of that. But then the anger turned into like worthlessness. Like, what's the point? Like, why am I here? Because I was trying to find my identity at the time in sports. And I didn't have that. And then you try to find your identity in people, and they're making fun of me, and it carried on from not just the people on the team, but people in the school building that were saying the same things, and it puts you in a state of why am I here, and I got there. I ended up having to go to some counseling sessions with 7 counties, and had to have some conversations about suicide. That it was just tough.
Yeah.
It was just hard.
Yeah, especially being a young guy, going through that, all those things that you talk about, but God, that's probably one of my most favorite prepositional phrases in all the Bible, maybe statements in the Bible. But God had a story. He had a perfect and pleasing plan for you. You're an athlete there at Seneca. It's probably impossible for anybody in Jefferson County Public Schools to not have heard of Steve Wigington if you're an athlete, and FCA, you were around FCA, you were part of FCA.
Mm-hmm.
You start to grow, your body starts to grow, it starts to get stronger, it starts to develop, and you're not the manager anymore, and you're not bullied anymore, and you're not, you start to develop that plan, that purpose that God has for you, and you become a great athlete, not a good athlete, but a great athlete at basketball and football both. And so, you start to get some looks from different places. Tell us, because recruiting looks a lot different now than what it did. And so tell me what it looks like now, you growing out of that 6th grade manager looking role to now, okay, I'm an athlete.
Yeah. So yeah, playing football, junior year, senior year, did pretty good. Was one of the top receivers in the state. Was gaining some interest, going to camps, all these different things. And it was a fun experience, but if I'm being honest, like, I didn't want to play football. I was just doing it as a favor for a friend of mine. I was content with going to play basketball in college. And I had a couple opportunities, some NAI schools, some D3 schools, one D2 school in Florida, University of Tampa, that I was kind of trying to decide between. And I remember Coach Strong got hired, and when Coach Strong got hired, a couple of the guys on his staff came out because they wanted to see DeMarcus throw the football. And it was very similar to going into my junior year. DeMarcus came to me and he said, hey, the coaches at U of L want to see me throw. He had already been offered a scholarship from Cragthorpe. They were doing their due diligence with sorting through the guys that were offered. So he's like, hey, they want to see me throw. Can you come and just catch footballs for me? I was like, yeah, no problem. Like, yeah, I got you, bro. And, we did that. And I remember talking with Coach Hurt and Coach Carter out there that day. And they said, you can really come and help us out over at the University of Louisville. And at the time, there weren't any scholarships available left. So I had the opportunity to walk on with football through that experience.
Man, I remember that. I'm there at the time. You're coming in. I had already been there a couple years anyway. You're a walk on, but you like deserve the respect from all the people around. And I just remember, Coach Strong even saying that, that he's a person that's going to bring the best out in people. You want him around in the locker room. You want him around on the side. And I know your seasons didn't plan out the way it was with football, whether it's scholarship or whether that's getting all conference or this and that, but you made a difference in the locker room. What was it like playing for Coach Strong and those guys? I mean, you were part of some great teams.
Yeah, it was fun. The thing that I remember probably most vividly, I'm not gonna say his name, but one of the coaches my freshman year, he told me, he said, stop taking reps, you won't play here. And for me, it was one of those things where Coach Strong was always saying the best player will play. And he always said if the underclassman is just as good as the upperclassman, you play the underclassman. So what that told me was that I have opportunities. I just got to take advantage of those opportunities. Now, when I did get my opportunities, as a freshman, I messed up some of those opportunities. You run the wrong route or you line up in the wrong spot. But I remember this specific coach saying that to me, and that kind of, motivated something inside of me to say, like, I'm here for a reason. I see other freshmen that are getting on the field. I can do that. So, my route was get on the bus. And the best way to get on the bus was through special teams. And, I'm grateful that, my hard work and my efforts that were that I, put in during practice and workouts my freshman year were honored. And I remember going to have a conversation with Coach Carter, and I was like, "Hey, you said that if we want to get on the bus, then we got to do certain things." And I said, "I've done these things. Let me get on the bus." Mm-hmm. And Coach Carter, he honored what he said. Coach Strong honored what he said, and it was a great experience. Overall, got a chance to play as a walk-on my freshman year, which a lot of people don't get that opportunity. And I'm forever grateful. And then I was actually talking to a guy the other day about just our staff, and he was asking me what it was like, playing for Coach Strong. And I said, I don't think I realized at the time the collection of guys that he put together to really help us be successful. You look at Coach Hurt, just won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. You look at Coach Steichen, who is now the head coach for the Colts. You look at Sharon Moore, who's the head coach at Michigan. You look at Coach BJ, who's been around Division I football, coaching at a lot of different places. Coach Dugan's my wide receiver coach. One of the best men, God-fearing men that I've ever had an opportunity to encounter. Coach Watson, just who he is as a person. When they told me I couldn't play football anymore because of my knee injuries, I remember Coach Watson hugging me and crying. I'm like, bro, I'm a walk-on. Like, I ain't played for you in 2 years. Like, I have nothing to do with helping you make a better salary. Yeah. And he's in tears because I can't play football anymore. I think, Coach Moore, Coach Bedford, that dude, he came up to me multiple times just praising the hard work and the efforts that I put in and talking to me about his experience. I mean, even Coach Slade, that's a guy that pointed me in the direction of Inky Johnson, who he coached, and I'm getting an opportunity to hear his story and gain motivation from that. It was just an awesome experience. Coach Strong was a solid guy. He put us in positions to be successful, but not only on the field, he set us up, I believe, for life.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That was a great group. You mentioned most of them, and not all of them, and there's something about the influence that a coach has on a young man or young athletes, male or female, lives. your attitude was contagious in such a positive way. You're a positive person. You're upbeat. You have fun. There's a lot of excitement and energy to you. Where do you get that from?
Man, it comes from one place and one place only. The joy that I have in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I think, as I struggled with identity for a long time, for me, the only thing that pulled me out of that identity crisis was understanding who Christ has called me to be. Galatians 2:20 says, "For I am crucified with Christ," and he says, "It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live, I live for the Son who loved me and gave himself for me." And for me, when I think about, what Christ has done for me, like I have no choice but to live for him, and that, for me, it creates this excitement and this joy that I get to wake up like, man, God knows what I said, did, thought on yesterday, and he didn't kill me in my sleep last night. Let me celebrate today. Like, let me celebrate today. And yes, I still fail. I'm still gonna fail, but the Bible tells me that I have hope. I have hope in the cross. I have hope in the finished work of Christ, and because of that, like, yeah, some days are harder than others, but you can still have an outlook of hope. You can still have an outlook of excitement. And too, like, as I look at all the things that I've been through, whether it was the depression, whether it was the mental health things, whether it was the knee injuries, every stop in my life, God has taught me something. And I have been grateful because now I can look at those things, and just like it says in James, I can consider it pure joy. At the time, it ain't joy. At the time, it ain't joy. But now I'm in a position where I'm like, okay, if I go through something else in the future, I know the Lord is teaching me something or bringing me to look more like his son. So.
You were obviously you're part of FCA now, but you were part of FCA when you were a student athlete at U of L. It's always been a joy to me to watch athletes grow up when they come in as a freshman year and they grow and they start to mature, and they're growing in their walk with Christ and they're becoming discipled. And you see an athlete or young male or female that, like, man, they would make a really good staff person, and I look at whether that's been Scott Long, whether that's been Jeff Gardner, whether that's been you, whether that's been Kelsey Worrell, and you really hate naming names because there's so many names that you could, and Malcolm IU. I mean, there's so many people. Talk to us about being a student athlete, being part of FCA. What drew you to FCA when you were a student athlete?
Yeah, so as a walk-on, at the time, before Shabazz Napier, it wasn't a lot of food for us. So, we in the locker room and you smell chicken sandwiches, and you see women coming in the football facility, and this is right after camp, and camp eyes are real. So, it's one of those things where it's like, man, you get chicken and females? Yeah, sign me up, And I remember Troy Paisley, he said, yeah, it's FCA. And I was like, oh, snap, like we got FCA on campus? And Troy was like, yeah, he said we meet on Mondays from 8 to 9 right out the study hall. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. So I get a meal, and I get the gospel, and I get girls. This works. So that was my motivation initially for going. But as I went there and as I heard the God, I don't know what it was, because I grew up in church, but I felt like the gospel was just different, in a sense of not a different message, but a different understanding of truth. Because I had never heard anyone share the gospel the way that I heard Chris share it. One of the first times I went to FCA, and it was a way that the Bible, such heavy biblical truths, were broken down to be understood, or babies could eat it, and it was good. And I was like, okay, let me go back. And it started to change from I'm showing up for chicken and like, nah, I'm showing up for Jesus. I'm showing up because I want to know more about him. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, again, and man, watching you grow from taking what you said, baby food, to really eating steak dinner where you're at now. Just looking at Scott and you and some of those other guys that great communicators of God's word. And sitting over here on this side, you feel like a proud father. Like, wow, that's I love getting out my notebook, and writing down when you speak. I'll catch myself taking notes. And some of the things I may write down, like, man, I've heard that before. Like, who said that? Like, oh, maybe I said that. And then maybe I learned that from someone that discipled me. So it just gets passed. It gets passed on. That there's no competition. It's just a joy to do life with someone like that. You mentioned Chick-fil-A sandwiches. You mentioned girls where you actually, Margaret Harris was a track star at the University of Louisville. She started coming to FCA and changed her name, man. It's no longer Margaret Harris, but Margaret Nance.
Yeah.
And tell us how that started. Tell us how you met, because Margaret's she was an integral part of our FCA as well. And now you guys are a one team with the Nance family. So tell us how y'all met.
Yeah, so we met on campus. She was so at FCA at the time we would break up into groups, so we would do small groups, and she would come to the group that I was leading, and she'd be in there, she'd be laughing at my jokes, and she'd chime in every once in a while, and I remember vividly Marcus Smith. He came up to me. He was like, "Man, I got this girl for you," and I was like, "For me?" And I had met Margaret and we had talked a couple times, but it was never anything like that. And he's like, "Yeah, man, her name is Margaret." And I'm like, "Margaret? I don't want nobody named Margaret. This old name." Like, he was like, "Nah, man, like she's really a good one, man. She's a good one." And so I was like, "All right, let's see what Marcus is talking about." So we continue communication and conversation, and I remember, man, it was after FCA one night, and she stayed back to talk to somebody. I can't remember who, but she asked me for a ride home, and this was like one of our, like I had known her, but I didn't know her that well, so I gave her a ride home, and when I gave her a ride home, I parked the car, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm about to walk you to your door." And she was like, "I don't know you. You ain't finna walk me to my door." And I'm like, "You just got in the car with me. Like, like come on." So I ended up walking her to the bottom step. And she lived on the 3rd floor. So I walked her to the bottom step, and she was like, "All right, bye." And I was like, "Nah, I got to walk you to your door." I was like, "My mom would kill me," because that's how I was raised. So, it wasn't anything malicious. I'm like legit trying to help her, like make sure she's safe getting to where she lived. And she was like, "I don't want you to know where I live." And I'm like, "We're already here. Like, it ain't that, So I ended up walking her all the way up to the door, and she slammed the door and walked in. I was like, "Dang, you couldn't even say bye, couldn't say thank you, nothing." And that from that single experience, man, 12 years later, it's been a cool ride, a cool journey.
It's been good to watch you guys. So you left when you graduated. Obviously you got an opportunity, like you said, with basketball. Basketball may have been secondary, but we probably at U of L, we probably had to have the best basketball team of football guys in the country. Okay,
Yeah.
so you actually got to play some professional basketball.
Yeah, I had some opportunities. Yeah.
Had some, but you took some too, right?
Not officially. Like I had contracts. I played some semi-pro ball, but that was the gist of it.
So where was home base? Where was home base when you left college?
Yeah, so we were in Louisville. I ended up teaching and coaching, and at the same time I was playing basketball. And then there was a guy by the name of Frank Sadlow. Frank saw me playing in the SRC, and he said, "Hey, I think you can be really good at basketball." And I'm like, "No, I'm just playing pickup ball, like just trying to stay in shape." And Frank ended up getting me into a pro-am with a guy named Michael Stennett, who was the head coach at Beth Haven. Now he's at Fairdale. So he paid for it. He signed me up. So I mean, I had to say yes because I didn't have to put in. That's the gospel, by the way. Like I didn't have anything to do with it. Everything was already paid for. I was like, all right, might as well just say yes to it. So I showed up and did really well. My team actually won the championship of that pro invitational that he had that weekend, and then I did pretty well. Then I got invited back to play in the pro-am, and during the pro-am, played pretty well in that, and ended up getting an opportunity to get a couple contracts, but I couldn't take my wife with me at the time. They were willing to pay for me to come, but they weren't willing to pay for my wife to come. They didn't want to pay for a work visa, and we couldn't afford a visa. So I decided to turn those down. And then Frank, who is, man, I love Frank. He's just a guy that doesn't take no for an answer. He found a guy in Texas by the name of Jeremiah Haylett. And Jeremiah is an agent down there still. And through the connection of Jeremiah, he ended up getting me some pro workouts where I was working out for the Mavericks, the Knicks, and the Suns over the course of some weeks, and down there training to hopefully get opportunity to play professional basketball. And it was fun. It was a great time. And ironically, I thought I know you didn't ask this, but I gotta share this part of it. I thought I was going to Texas to play basketball, but when I was in high school, I prayed a prayer, and the prayer was, Lord, I need people that look like me, black and brown people, that are loving their families well and doing it the way that you have called them to do it. So that was my prayer in high school. And this is kind of how God works. So I prayed that prayer then, and then I'm thinking I'm going to Texas to play basketball. And the whole time while I'm there, I'm staying in the house with a guy named Jonathan. And Jonathan is one of my mentors, a guy that I look up to in the faith. And Jonathan is married to Winter at the time. Winter is the niece of Tony Evans. And when Margaret was growing up, she had moved to Dallas. So she had gained a connection with Winter. And Winter was a mentor to Margaret. So we're living with Jonathan and Winter. And while we're living with Jonathan and Winter, they have 4 girls. And I'm not realizing this at the time. I'm just, thinking I'm hooping. And the thing that I'm seeing, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. The thing that I'm seeing, and this is the first time I've seen this from a family that looks like me, black family. Like we
That's
wake
really
up.
good.
Yeah, it's so cool. We wake up in the morning, and Jonathan is opening up his Bible, and they're at breakfast reading the Bible, and he's praying for his daughters and his wife before he takes them to school. He's taking them to school. Then at nighttime when they get home, they're doing devotions. I'm seeing not only Jonathan, because this is how God works. Like, God is amazing, because the prayer that I prayed was just for an example. He didn't give me one example. He gave me a plethora of examples where I get a chance to see Jonathan Evans, who's now the pastor at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Texas. I'm seeing Jonathan Evans and his wife Kanika, and I'm seeing how they're loving their families well, and how Jonathan Evans is doing it. I'm seeing Jonathan Pitts, and I'm seeing Jerry and Priscilla and how they're loving their boys well. And I'm seeing Crystal and her husband and how they're loving their family well. And then I'm seeing the matriarch and the patriarch of this whole thing, Dr. Tony Evans and his wife, Sister Lois Evans, and this trickle-down effect of how they've loved their families well enough to where now they're passing on the blessings of God's favor onto their families, all because they're doing it the way that God has called them to do it.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember my dad telling me that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So there has to be a time when you're ready to really understand that.
Yeah.
And when that time is is ready, when the Spirit of God opens your heart to receive that, the person that God wants to use will appear before you.
Yeah.
And I do have to ask this because it's important. A lot of people probably wouldn't even ask the question, but I feel close enough to you that I can ask that. You made the observation like you had never seen this from someone that looked like me.
Yeah.
That's a big deal because
Yeah.
you could look at somebody. Obviously, you said that you had seen people where mom and dad was together, they're doing certain things, but you didn't see someone that looked like you
Yeah.
to do that. Why is that such a big deal?
I think because we need to be able to see an example to follow. And if I don't have an example in front of me that looks like me, then it's going to be hard for me to believe I can do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So, it's not a knock against, people that aren't black and brown. It's just a reality. Like if I don't see something, if I don't see what it looks like to do this thing a certain way from someone that looks like me, it's going to be difficult for me to think I can also do the same thing.
But see, someone of the opposite race could look and say, well, you're seeing it here, but from your eyes, it's like, okay, I'm seeing it, somebody looks like you.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing it like someone looks like me.
Yeah.
And not that that's not important, what you got going on there, because it is, but I need someone to look like me to let me see that. And that's good. I praise God that God put Jonathan Evans and his family in your life to see that this is not a white thing.
Yeah.
This is a multicultural thing, and so a multi-generational thing. It's a big deal. So thanks for taking the time to share that. So your family grew. That walking or taking her home from FCA meeting turned into some incredible moments.
Yeah.
Incredible memories.
Yeah.
Now you got the blessing of 4 kids.
Yeah.
Aaron, Abel, Asa, and Angel.
Yeah.
3 boys and a girl. That's an exciting home.
It is.
Right. I'm gonna ask you 2 questions. Right? What has marriage taught you, and what has parenting taught you?
Yeah. Marriage has really taught me that it's important to understand the needs of someone else over my own. And I think for me, I didn't really understand that for the first 8 years of our marriage, because a lot of it was consumed about, our marriage was consumed with things that I was involved in. And, in that moment or in those moments, because you're going, you don't really realize, like, man, I don't think I'm loving my wife well, even though I'm trying to, put us in the position as a family to be better. But really what was happening was I was putting them on a back burner to go and accomplish something that I haven't even checked with my wife to see, like, do you want this? So it's really taught me how to love someone and love how God has created someone different than me in a way that God has called me to do that. The Bible tells us as husbands that we are to, God gave a command to Adam where he says you are to keep and to cultivate. And, I didn't really understand what that meant until I would say maybe 3-4 years ago. To keep, meaning to protect. Keep this how I've already designed it. Keep this in the way that I have created it to be. And why am I doing that? Because God understood that Satan was in the garden. So we are to keep this thing the way that God has called us to keep. We're to protect it. We're to keep him out. But then to cultivate, and to cultivate means to create an environment of growth. He told them to be fruitful and multiply. And that is to be fruitful and multiply God's image. And that's in what I'm doing, but that's also in what my wife is doing. Like, God has created my wife with some special gifts and some special talents. God has created my wife to do a lot of amazing things, and I've realized like, man, the Lord has been faithful, but I've kind of put some of those gifts that my wife has on the back burner because of the gifts that He's given me, whether it's coaching, teaching, playing basketball, things like that. So really how to love my wife well. And then parenting has taught me so much. But I think the biggest takeaway is loving my children different than I don't say different. That's gonna sound bad because my mom and my dad, they did the best they could given the circumstances. But really, like loving my children in a way that allows them to know who God is from a more intimate level than what I learned growing up.
Yeah. Well, and that's respectful, man. I know the love that you have for your mom and dad. You speak of that often, and not just to me, but to our entire athletic department. So yeah, the love is definitely there for your family. Parenting, I don't want to say that marriage has come easier for me, but parenting, you got little yous running around.
Yeah.
Like, and you can see, like, I see all of the imperfections that I had and still have running around with my kids. And my kids are older, so they've gotten some of those out. Some of those, though, they've grown into younger Chris's. And, it's teaching me. I don't think I'm already there, but, like, to be more patient, to show more grace and mercy, because I know I received that. I'm 51, and I have still called my parents not long ago and said, "Hey, I am so sorry for the way I treated you when I was younger."
Yes.
And so parenting teaches us a whole lot, but there's a great representation there that's biblical about how our Father, yet even though that we are still sinners, He still adopts us into His family.
Yeah.
And that's a great picture on
sure.
that.
I always find myself, like, once I say something to my sons about something they should be doing, I always find myself like, man, God is telling me the same exact thing right now, like in a different light. Where I'm like, hey, like, how many times do I gotta tell you to stop doing this or stop doing that? And then I'm like, bro, God is telling me that. Like,
Yeah.
Like,
and there's been several times, like my girls are older now, and they're starting to like talk about or the dating thing, and that's a new deal because you've never been through this.
Yeah.
I've been through it as a dater, somebody that dated, but not someone that's a father into this.
Yeah.
And so the Bible says fathers do not exasperate your children. And I'm sure at times that there's been some times where, man, I got scratching my head. It's like, man, I've become my dad. Or I've become my mom in some of those things. And that's not necessarily a dig at them because they did the best they could at the time. And a lot of parenting is trial by error.
Yeah.
And it's living and then it's repenting.
Yeah.
Several times I've had to tell my kids, man, I'm sorry. Man, that was wrong. Your dad was wrong on that. Forgive me. So he's learned it. Tell us about. So you've been on FCA staff now for five years.
Yep.
5 years. It's been a good 5 years. What is being on staff now? You're on this side of FCA. You're not just a student athlete, but now you're leading. The mission with FCA is to lead every athlete and coach into a growing relationship with Christ and the church. So tell us what 5 years has looked like, what you've learned with that.
Yeah, it's been for me, it's been a like 5 years of just continued growth. It's been cool being able to really be around athletics on this side because you get a chance to be involved in things that the common fan wouldn't be able to see. But for me, and really, this realization came over the last couple of years, is just the responsibility to lead and shepherd coaches and athletes has has been awesome, but it's also been heavy, where you don't really understand the magnitude of it until you're in it, if that makes sense. I know you would understand. Maybe a listener may not understand, but when you get a chance to do life with coaches and athletes, their lives are revolved around sport. Their lives are revolved around being the best that they can be, whether it's a coach or whether it's an athlete. And a lot of these people, they love the Lord, but they struggle with trying to find balance, trying to find a sense of urgency when it comes to the things of the Lord, and rightfully so. Like there's a lot on the line when it comes to how they compete and the way that they show up for one another and the win-loss column. There's a lot that goes into that. So now that I'm on this side of it, it's an opportunity to love and serve well, to love them and serve them in such a way that, and I got this from you, that they would see Jesus in the way that I serve, that we serve, just within FCA, but really understanding the responsibility of being a shepherd to athletes and coaches, being encouraging, whether it's sitting down and having lunch with an athlete or setting up a time of being able to help an athlete be consistent in God's word, or it's someone new who doesn't have a clue about who Jesus is, and you get an opportunity to just sit down and have a conversation, and you pray that it'll lead to even more conversations to where someone would eventually just say yes. But it's taught me how to be patient with people. It's taught me how to be intentional, because if you're not intentional, they got stuff on their schedule, so it's on to the next. But it's taught me how to really take a step back from myself. Say, this ain't about me. This is about Jesus. Because you can really get high on this mindset of, I'm the FCA guy at the University of Louisville, and you can get a big head about who you get to serve and the different athletes you get a chance to interact with.
I have watched, just been 26 years of FCA. I've watched several FCA people lose credibility within their ministry because of that.
Yeah.
That they make it more about them instead of, look, I'm not a coach. You're not a coach. We are a shepherd to come alongside and to strengthen and encourage athletes and coaches where they need to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not even saying a whole lot. It's just being around.
Yeah.
But I've watching you grow over the last 5 years, even as an athlete, when you say something, I'd see you write it down, and then when you're leading a group, you would speak, you would share it, the notes that you had wrote down. And then when you came on staff, the same thing happened with a Monday night or a Bible study. And then I remember when Coach Mack, when you came on, you were going to take basketball. And I was doing basketball. I started the last 2 years with Coach Patino, and those were great years. And then with Coach Padgett, and then when Coach Mack came, and then it would be silly and not a good steward of our staff for me to try to run all those sports. It couldn't happen. So that's the reason you hire people, faithful people, who will be able to teach others also. So now I can spend more time in this area and give it to you. But the first couple of years with Coach Mack, that first year, we would do it together.
Yeah.
And we would do that study. And then my intent was to leave, man. Like, I'm going to show this guy how to do this, and then I'm gonna leave. And you did that. You took it, and you ran. Still was hard for me because you get glued into a place, but that's to watch you not just survive, but thrive. So Coach Mack leaves, and Coach Payne, that was a good test for me to watch how you act with that. And those were rough years of basketball, but it was very rich in developing relationships with coaches and athletes in that time of need. And I watched how you handle that, a rough situation still being faithful, because everybody wants the revival year.
Yeah.
Everybody wants that, but will we, as an FCA person, be faithful in the 4 and whatever year?
Yeah.
So those are big. So thanks for being faithful at that,
Yeah.
at what God's called you to do on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned a lot during that time. And I enjoyed because it looked different. Like, Coach Kelsey, he allows me to do pregame chapels and we do Bible studies in the off season on Fridays, and he's in there, he's locked in. But ministry was still happening, like with Coach Payne and Coach Mack, and now that eyes are on U of L in a larger scale because of the success of this past season with basketball. Coach Payne allowed us to do things with his staff. Coach Payne allowed us to have a coaches study where we would have assistant coaches and GAs, and we would meet on Thursday mornings in the GA room, and I'd bring Chick-fil-A, and we'd be going through the book of Philippians, and we had a player study. We meet on Wednesdays. So we had these things going on, and it was a very unique opportunity for me because now I get to have conversations with guys about, and not saying I still don't, but it's even, to me, it was even sweeter to have conversations with guys that say, yo, this, like, basketball is great, basketball is amazing, but basketball ain't the end all be all. Basketball is like, don't find your identity in a win-loss column. Mm-hmm. And it's so much easier, I think, to open up God's word and share with someone who's in a valley than it is to do that with someone who's on a mountaintop.
That's right.
Because if go ahead.
No, that's right. I mean, you're right. So, if you're faithful in the small things, God will entrust you to more, into many. And watching you not just show up, but to really invest into guys who are really, really hurting, that makes this even sweeter. It doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
It's still ministry is ministry. But there's a faithful God that's just been faithful in that. So that's good.
Yeah.
Real good.
Yeah, it's been sweet. And, I'm grateful now. I mean, very grateful with the guys that Coach Kelsey has put around, himself, but also the guys that I get a chance to just do life with over there. It's been really sweet. So.
I love watching a coach be passionate about basketball, but also passionate about life.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to be around Coach Kelsey for any extended amount of time and not get a vibe from him. Like, this guy loves life.
Yeah.
This guy loves what he has been called to do. He has been called here by God.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would tell you that God has put him on a mission to raise up everyone in that building to be a better version of themselves.
For sure.
The way that God has created them to be. And it's a joy. It's a joy for us to be able to, and you to get really even a front row seat on that.
Yeah.
Of the excitement. Yeah. Well, let me close it up with this. What would you say to if you could go back and talk to your, well, let's just even say your 6th grade self,
mm-hmm.
Where you had a lot of trials. Now how old are you now?
33.
33.
Oh, yeah.
33, go back to 6th grade self. What would you say to you?
Man, there's a lot of things I would say to my 6th grade self. I think one of the biggest things would be cautious about who you're entrusting yourself to. I did it, and this is just fresh on my mind. I've been soaping through the book of John, and in John 2 it says Jesus would not entrust himself to the people because he knew what was in them. And it had me thinking, like who have I been entrusting myself to? Who have I been entrusting? Because when you entrust, that means that you're relying on, you're hoping that this thing would change your circumstance because that's what the people wanted. And I would just tell my 6th grade self, like, who are you entrusting yourself to? Who are you relying on? Who are you putting your hope in? Where do you find your identity? Mm-hmm. And then I would just tell my 6th grade self, like, all of this stuff is vanity. Like, all of these things that you want, all these things that you're expecting, it's really empty. unless you find your hope and your identity in the Lord. That's who we should entrust ourselves to. So
Good stuff, man. Well, I remember Steve Wigginton. I remember Ken Watson. You know, you're getting old when you use guys. Benjamin Watson played tight end for the Patriots. Now he's retired. I didn't have a relationship with Benjamin. I had a relationship with Benjamin's father. So now I know I'm getting old. Okay,
Old
Steve
guy over
Wigginton, Ken Watson, Tommy Nelson. You know, I can see now why you had those people. But now I get older. Now I'm getting a different view, a different seat. I'm looking at eyes through like a Tommy did with me, or like a Wig did with me. And you know, you see Scott, you see Jeff Gardner, you see yourself, you see again a lot of people that you could mention, and like, man, now I can see why the Bible says where Paul looks at Timothy, he's like, man, my son, I'm so excited to hear of your faith.
Mm.
I'm glad to see the things that you're doing throughout this region. You know, he just speaks into that. And man, I am what I'm trying to say is I'm proud of you. Like I really am, man, what you've done on campus with sports that God has entrusted you with, and how you love your wife, how you love your kids. You got incredible gentleness and patience. You're a great communicator of God's word. And man, it's a joy for me to be a partner with you, and love you. And thanks for coming on our FCA podcast, man.
Yeah.
So I'm really good to have you.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right, brother.
Yeah.
Love you.
Yes, sir.